Thanks again for joining us. And as we continue to monitor the EU leaders' meeting, which continues today in Brussels to further discuss security and energy after the Russian oil deal. And we'll talk some more about this because leaders reached an agreement last night, an agreement in principle on banning oil imports from Russia.
Now, once legally imposed in the coming days, the embargo will hit seaborne shipments of Russian oil and encompass most imports from Russia once Poland and Germany stop buying it by the end of 2022, which diplomats and officials from both countries say is now government policy. The remaining 10% will be temporarily exempt from the embargo so that the landlocked countries of Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic have access via the Zhruba pipeline from Russia.
I'm optimistic about the plan's success where Latvia and Estonia.
The important news is that the European Union is still united in its purpose. The purpose is to stop Russia's aggressive war in Ukraine. We have two tools with which to do that. One is to support Ukraine militarily, economically, and the second is through the isolation of Putin's economy via sanctions. And yesterday we agreed on the sixth sanction round, which includes oil. It will cut about 2/3 of Russia's oil exports to the EU, which means 2/3 of the monies that we send to Russia will no longer be sent. And this is very, very good news indeed. The stronger the sanctions, the quicker the war will end.
After lengthy discussions yesterday, we finally reached an agreement, and I was positively surprised because when we went into the room, the signs were not that great, but everybody was very constructive, and I'm happy that we reached the agreement. But of course, we also have to discuss already the seventh package because things are not going any better in Ukraine, and as long as the war is going on, there is no peace. Ukraine hasn't won the war. We haven't done enough. And of course, we talked about pushing Ukraine for peace, that there are signs that the peace could be the ultimate goal, but we had very intense discussions about this, and it's only up to the Ukrainians to say what kind of peace they are able to live with, and also we have to give them all the military support so that they can defend themselves, because the peace can't be the ultimate goal. Even if there's peace, the atrocities for those territories that are conquered will continue. So if we want to end the human suffering, we also have to push the aggressor back to its borders.
Well, some more now on that deal, as very early this morning, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said leaders agreed to cut 90% of oil imports from Russia by the end of the year. She says the remaining 10% will be temporarily exempt from the embargo so that landlocked Hungary, which was the main holdout for a deal, along with Slovakia and the Czech Republic, as mentioned earlier, all connected to the southern leg of the pipeline, have access, which they cannot easily replace. Ms. von der Leyen says the deal would clear the way for other elements of a sixth package of EU sanctions on Russia to take effect, including cutting Russia's biggest bank, Sberbank, from the SWIFT messaging system and banning 3 more Russian state-owned broadcasters.
I'm very glad that the leaders were able to agree in principle on the sixth sanctions package. This is very important. Thanks to this, Council should now be able to finalize a ban on almost 90% of all Russian oil imports by the end of the year. This is an important step forward. Now left over is the around about 10 or 11% that are covered by the southern Družba. And indeed, here we have agreed, this is for the moment being exempted. We have agreed to that the Council will revert to the topic as soon as possible in one way or the other. So this is a topic where we'll come back to, and where we will still have to work on. But it is a big step forward, what we did today. So this is good that we now de-SWIFT the Sberbank. There is a ban on insurance and reinsurance of Russian ships by EU companies. a ban on providing Russian companies with a whole range of business services, and very important, the suspension of broadcasting in the European Union of 3 further Russian state outlets that were very typically spreading broadly the misinformation that we have witnessed over the last weeks and months, this procedure.
Thank you very much for...
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen speaking there. We have been mentioning how this deal impacts on countries like Hungary. Today, the Prime Minister Viktor Orban said exempting the country from the EU's oil embargo deal avoided what he called an atomic bomb being dropped on its economy. According to him, Hungary has enough problems like skyrocketing energy prices, high inflation, and Europe being on the brink of an economic crisis. Hungary has been handed concessions to agree an oil embargo on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine by making a promise that the EU's embargo excludes the pipeline that landlocked Hungary relies on for Russian oil. The bloc aims to reduce Moscow's income to finance the war it launched 100 days ago.
Well, on Monday, Russia's energy company Gazprom said it would suspend gas supply to Dutch energy company Gazprom from today, after the latter refused to pay in rubles. Gazprom says it did not receive any payments from Gazprom for the gas supplied in April by the end of the working day on Monday, which is the payment deadline outlined in the contract. So they decided to suspend gas delivery from today, May 31st, until payment is made as required. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte said a cut in Russian gas supplies will be limited in its effects for the Netherlands. Gazprom also says it's made alternative arrangements to cover the 2 billion cubic meters of gas it had expected to receive from Gazprom through October.
Namelijk dat lijkt beperkt te zijn in zijn effect, omdat het niet om hele grote kubieke meters gaat, dus grote hoeveelheden gas, aantallen BCM's. Maar we gaan het natuurlijk heel goed bekijken. Je moet echt wel even precies zien wat de impact is, maar het lijkt in eerste instantie mee te vallen.
We understand that oil prices are up today following the agreement by European leaders to ban oil imports from Russia. Brent crude rose above $123 a barrel, the highest it's been for 2 months. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was grading at $119.34 a barrel, up $4.27 in a 4th session of the gains in a row, hitting its highest since March 9. Prices for oil and gas have soared in recent months, fueled in part by the Ukraine war. Brent crude has risen more than 70% over the past year. Russia currently supplies 27% of EU's imported oil and 40% of its gas, and oil prices climbed again on news of the latest EU embargo. Meanwhile, the rising cost of living threatens to curtail some EU countries' appetite for further sanctions, which could also hurt their own economies.
Joining us now is Senior Manager, Oil, Gas and Power Group, Temitope Kolade. He joins us from Maryland in Lagos. Temitope, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and I'm sure you've been following the developments through today, because that's your sector, isn't it? EU leaders reached an agreement late Monday to ban 90% of Russian crude by the end of the year. That embargo is part of the European Union's 6th sanctions package on Russia since it invaded Ukraine. How significant is this round of sanctions on Russia?
Apparently very significant. Again, because Russia has its allies also, India, a very strong member, and of course China as well. It appears that it has some caution. But that's not to take away from the fact that it would rather take those things to Europe, which are closer locations to the market, right? So what it means for Russia is that its revenue over a period of time could be threatened. Apparently, if you have to supply to India and China, for instance, have been taking more. They've taken so much last month of crude from Russia, but it can't continue because typically supply and demand are driven largely by economies rather than politics. So whatever politics is underlying in that will not be sustainable, because over a period of time, the expectation is that you will not be able to buy more than what you need, more than what you can store, more than what your economy can handle at the time.
So you're saying this, of course, will not affect China and India, who are the likely buyers of Russian oil?
It would impact them in a way because currently Russia is offering those oil at discounts to these two countries. So it means that in a way, India and China are able to buy at some better price, right? Which is one of the incentives for them to take some more oil at the moment from Russia as well. So what it means is that they can take so much at the moment, but in a matter of time, say weeks, they won't need as much anymore. Like, for instance, there are predictions that they're not going to get as much as they got last month in the current month, right? Or in the coming month. So it will continue to decline because economies will play a major role in whatever demand that you're getting, that Russia is getting from China and India.
And the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the purpose is for Russia to get less financial resources to fund its war. I also wonder what they think about, China and India and what they're doing. But as to today's oil prices, we are seeing jumps. How is this war in Ukraine impacting that?
Well, definitely impacting it in a very great way. Number one, from speculations, because people are already reacting. Across Europe, it means that, except for the likes of Hungary and maybe a few other countries, the Czech Republic, for instance, that would continue to get oil from Russia, it means that the other countries that have opted out, that have aligned with the sanctions by the EU, would have to get it at a bigger cost, right? So the expectation is that really if they're getting it at a higher cost, you're changing your source of supply, you're going to have to pay more for it. And before that even happens, the market has reacted already, and we've seen the jump in the oil price. So indeed, in the coming days, it's expected that it would continue in that manner, except we get some production from some other places to help regularize the price or maybe make it more stable. And that's what OPEC tries to do most of the time. Unfortunately, production output in the countries that also produce oil plays a major factor in whatever role that OPEC wants to play.
And we're also seeing that, these energy prices which have soared is contributing to heated inflationary environment in many countries. Where does OPEC Plus come in?
Well, we need to realize, number one, that Russia is an ally of the OPEC Plus. So it's a delicate balance that OPEC Plus would have to do because of the interest of Russia as well. The other part of it is that if you look at that block, right, Saudi plays a very huge role in that. And what Saudi has said is that they have limited capacity for expansion, right? So increasing output is not something that could be done overnight, right? In some other countries like Nigeria, you would agree with me that we are facing our issues. We've not been able to meet with the OPEC quota for a while, and then security issues are even increasing that gap for us. And so that is also affecting investment in a way. If you also consider the fact that we're just coming out of COVID-19, and then pandemic has also affected the kind of investments that we've seen in oil fields, it means that there is very little that OPEC Plus could do, because it's a game of demand and supply. And the way to deal with it for OPEC will really be to say, let's increase the OPEC quota for each of the countries. For instance, Nigeria's OPEC quota was increased not too long ago, but we've not been able to meet what it was before, so it doesn't change anything as such. So what we find is that even when OPEC says, oh, give us more oil from your country, if you're not able to meet that supply, then the fact that there is then a supply issue will then further drive up the costs and the price of oil. So really, there is so much that OPEC could do except for trying to regulate and trying to increase demand to ensure that it balances out the price. But like I said earlier, we also need to pay attention to the fact that OPEC needs to also respect Russia's wishes because it's one of the two biggest partners in the alliance.
I'm glad you mentioned how this impacts on Nigeria as well, because that was going to be my next question. But let's go back to Hungary and Slovakia. These countries, as well as Czech Republic, have been given temporary exemptions, from this Russia oil ban. They've given until the end of the year. Do you think that's enough time for them to even things out with the European Union so that they can get along with the rest of the bloc?
Maybe, maybe not. Largely, the questions are driven by economics again for me. And the reason is because if you listen to Zelensky, for instance, he's not happy that the whole of EU could not even unite to have that cut of Russian oil, right? And the reason is because for Hungary, he says economics is very critical to it in taking whatever decision. They already have pipelines that supply those oil. And decommissioning those is like a lot of cost for them, right? Again, what would Hungary like to do? Is it enough for EU to impose its agreement on some of the countries? I think that each of the countries would have to kind of consider what exactly it means for their individual economy, for their sovereignty over the period of time. The truth is that if they unite as a force today and they say we just want to stop Russia by every means and want to put the entire sanction on all of the oil going to EU, they would take that decision, but that would be a political decision that might have real economic impact on the people of each of those countries. And that's what Hungary has said it needs some time to deal with, right? It's not just enough to say, oh, let's pull out. How do we make up for an alternative supply, right? So it could happen today. It could happen by end of the year. Again, it's going to be what's the willpower for each of the countries that are involved. How ready are they to deal with what economic issues it will throw out to them?
We appreciate your time. Senior Manager, Oil, Gas and Power Group, Temitope Kolade-Anderson. Always a pleasure having you join us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
In the meantime, Russia's defense ministry has released footage showing a cargo ship leaving the Ukrainian port of Mariupol for the first time since the Russian forces seized the city. The Russian-backed separatist leader of the Ukrainian breakaway region of Donetsk said the ship that was loaded with steel ropes was headed to Russia.
Ukraine says a shipment of metal to Russia from Mariupol, whose capture gave Moscow an overland bridge linking mainland Russia and pro-Russian separatist territory to Russian-annexed Crimea, amounted to looting. Russia seized full control of Mariupol earlier this month when more than 2,400 Ukrainian fighters surrendered at the besieged Azovstal steelworks. Russia said last week the port had been cleared of mines and was open again to commercial vessels.